Hello. Hi. I'm not a lawyer, but I work at a law firm. I work at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is the oldest and I think most important digital rights group in the world. We've probably been adverse to some of you. We've certainly been amici with others. And I've worked there for most of my adult life now, 25 years. And I'm an activist. And the job of an activist is to try and get people to engage with digital policy issues. And the problem with digital policy issues is they're very abstract, they're very technical, and they're a very long way away. And for extremely good reasons, people mostly care about things that are immediate and concrete. And we can just not do anything about these tech issues, and we will eventually find a way to make them immediate and concrete because everything will be on fire. But ideally, what we'd like to do is raise the salience of these issues before everything's on fire. And so for 25 years, I've had this game of coming up with metaphors, similes, framing devices. In my other life, I'm a best-selling science fiction novelist, so I've written novels about this stuff. And then I coined this term, Enshittification. And it turns out that a minor license to vulgarity is all it took to raise the salience of these issues for lots and lots of normal people. So I wanted to talk a little about enshittification before our fireside chat and the kind of core of the thesis, what it describes, and the phenomenological account that it makes of how our platforms have gotten so terrible. And then maybe I can talk about it with an enforcer who's done things in the field instead of just talking about this stuff. So the idea of enshittification is that platforms follow a normal and predictable pattern of decay. In stage one of enshittification, a platform is good to its end users. It finds a way to lock those end users in. So let's look at Facebook. In 2006, Mark Zuckerberg wanted to bring people onto Facebook, not just American college kids with a .edu address, but anyone in the country and in the world. And the problem, of course, was that everyone who wanted social media at that point was already using a service called MySpace. So Mark Zuckerberg said to them, look, guys, I know that you're having a lot of fun on MySpace, but I don't know if you realize this. It's owned by this evil, crapulent, senescent, immortal Australian vampire billionaire named Rupert Murdoch, who spies on you with every hour that God sends. And nobody should use social media owned by a billionaire that spies on you, so come use Facebook. And we piled into Facebook, and we locked ourselves into Facebook through the collective action problem, which is you love your friends, but they're a pain in the ass, and 6 of you can't agree in your group chat where you're going to go for beers this Friday, so there's no way 200 of you are going to agree on when it's time to leave Facebook. So as we got locked into Facebook, it was time for stage 2. Secure in the knowledge that we would have a hard time leaving Facebook, Zuckerberg could make things worse for us, not out of sadism, although I wouldn't put it past him, but rather in order to make things better for another group of stakeholders, business customers. And so he goes to the advertisers and he says, do you remember we told these rubes that we weren't going to spy on them? Obviously we were lying. We spy on them all the time, and for a remarkably small amount of money, we will target ads to them with exquisite fidelity. And because we are such proud craftspeople, we've invested in this whole building full of anti-fraud engineers who do nothing from sunup to sundown but make sure that when you give us $1 to show an ad to a specific kind of user, we will find that user and we will stick that ad in their face. And so advertisers pile in, publishers pile in, other business customers pile in, and they get locked into, through something you might have learned about in your Econ 101 class, monopsony. It's much easier for a supplier to be locked in than for a customer. And so now they find it hard to leave too. We're locked to the platform, they're locked to us. And now it's time for stage 3 of enshittification, which is making things worse for business customers in order to enrich the shareholders and executives. And so advertisers find that the ad targeting fidelity has gone way down, ad prices have gone through the roof, and ad fraud has exploded in ways that are just baffling. In 2017, Procter & Gamble said, we don't think these surveillance ads are performing the way the vendors say they will. We're going to take our annual surveillance advertising spend from $200 million a year to zero. And they experienced a 0% drop in sales because, to a first approximation, no one saw those ads. They disappeared down the fraud hole because why spend money on anti-fraud when your vendors are locked to you? And so the platform gets worse for them, it gets worse for publishers. The quantum of material we have asked to see in our feeds dwindles to a kind of homeopathic residue so that there is space made for things people will pay to cram into our face, but those people are getting ripped off too. It turns out even if you're paying for the product, you're still the product. Being the product is not a matter of whether you're paying or not, it's a matter of whether the firm is afraid of what will happen to them if they make you into the product. And so we're in the final stage of enshittification, which is withdrawing all the value and pocketing pocketing it for shareholders and executives. And the problem is that's a very brittle equilibrium, because the difference between I hate Facebook, but I can't seem to stop using it, and I hate Facebook, and I'm never going to use it again, is razor thin. You get one live stream mass shooting, one whistleblower, one privacy scandal, people bolt for the exits. Wall Street says, maybe the growth run of this firm is over. Maybe they're overvalued as a growth firm. Maybe they're a mature firm now. You get mass sell-offs like January 2022, when Zuckerberg said, oh, we had slightly fewer new US user signups in the last quarter than we'd anticipated. And there was a $240 billion one-day sell-off, at the time the largest single decapitalization of any firm in the history of markets. You love to see it. And when that happens, the platform panics. And being technical people, they have a technical term for panicking. They call it pivoting. And so it is that one day Mark Zuckerberg arose from his sarcophagus and said, hearken unto me, brothers and sisters, for I've had a vision. I know that I told you that your future would consist of arguing with your most racist uncle using the primitive text interface I developed in my Harvard dorm to rate the bangability of my fellow undergraduates. However, the true future is one in which I transform you and everyone you love into a legless, sexless, low polygon, heavily surveilled cartoon character so that I can imprison you in a virtual world I ripped off from a 25-year-old dystopian cyberpunk novel that I call the metaverse. And that's the final stage. That's the pile of shit stage. Now, the question is, why did this happen? Did it happen because we didn't shop carefully enough? I don't think so. I think shopping your way out of a monopoly is like recycling your way out of a wildfire. I think the only people who think that you can vote with your wallet are billionaires, because their wallets are thicker than all of our wallets put together. And it's the only kind of election they can win, because there's only like 1,000 of them. So I don't think it's our fault, nor do I even blame the ketamine-addled Zucker-Muskian failures who've appointed themselves arbiters of our digital lives, because they're just doing what they said they were going to do. I blame our policymakers. I think they created an enshittigenic policy environment by taking decisions in living memory that we can identify that had the foreseeable and foreseen outcome of creating the environment in which the worst ideas of the worst people made the most money. And then everything else followed, because, as our friends on the right like to tell us, incentives matter. And the good news about that is that if this is not the great forces of history or, the iron laws of economics or returns to scale or whatever, then we actually have a policy way out of it. We're not prisoners of history. We have the option to do something about it. And I think we're in a remarkable moment. I think we're in a moment in which doing something about it has been more possible than at any time in my career. We have seen a surge in anti-monopoly activism all over the world. Obviously we saw some stuff starting under Trump 1. The Biden administration was historical in generational terms here in America. Like all the best Americans, I'm Canadian. And in Canada, we had the least effective antitrust authority in the world. Our Competition Bureau had in its entire history challenged 3 mergers, but had never succeeded in challenging a merger in its whole history. But in 2024, Justin Trudeau, hardly known as a man who's hostile to the corporate sector, whipped his caucus to give them the most expansive powers of any antitrust authority in the world. We saw antitrust surges in the UK under a series of conservative governments so shambolic that one of them didn't outlast a head of lettuce. The European Union unrolled the Digital Markets Act and the Digital Services Act. Again, world historic antitrust actions that stop pretending that the answer to our problems is making tech overlords behave themselves, and instead, by introducing interoperability mandates and other measures that lower switching costs, we've decided we need to make those firms less important, not better. We saw antitrust surges in Australia, South Korea, Singapore, Japan, but also in China, which tells you that this is not a secular phenomenon. This is going on everywhere in the world for different reasons all at once, because as our friends in finance will tell us, according to Stein's law, anything that can't go on forever eventually stops. Thank you.